So we had a couple of great questions from the audience. So I'll try to field one to all of you here. So Thomas, we had some questions early on. So could you help us understand a little bit more about what waste in agriculture means and how vertical farming or indoor farming can help reduce that? I think there are a few questions that came up about what wastes are created in agriculture.
Yeah, well, I guess I would start with saying we're trying to get to maybe waste is the wrong word because they're really just resources, particularly in the space context. But for example, field production, okay, anything in a field, whatever's sold and taken off to be consumed leaves the field, it leaves that system. Everything else usually gets turned in and recycled through biodegradation and whatnot. But the same is true for controlled environment systems or plant factories or whatever terminology you want to use. You're putting a whole bunch of resources in to make the food, and a bunch of that leaves the stuff we eat. But in that context, these buildings, you don't turn it back into the soil, so you've got to find some way to do it. So we're looking at things like composting or some ways to recapture this carbon dioxide that you put in and the nutrients in the water, but also particularly in an urban environment, bringing some of those resources back in. I mean, you've shipped it off, people have eaten it, but you can bring waste back in to, top up because at least has left the system, want to bring it back. So that's what I meant in terms of waste. It's, let's not call it waste.
Yeah, so waste is a resource essentially. So what I'm thinking is kind of like excess heat, for example, from the lights. Would that be considered a waste?
Yeah, well, it's used. So okay. The light, the waste heat, right, that comes from the light is less that you have to use in your HVAC system, for example. No, the opposite can be, you can have too much and you actually have to cool. Same with all the water that's going through. There's a lot of misinformation or disinformation about the efficiency of these things. They say, we use 97% less water. Well, it depends how you look at it. In the case of a controlled environment, the plants are going through a lot of that water and you've got to condense it. Yes, it stays in the system unless you're blowing it out your windows, but you still have to condense it. And that's an energy intensive thing as well. So when I said at the end of things, we really got to nail down, energy is the big one because these are energy intensive systems. So.
That's actually a really great segue to a question that came in for Lynn about the idea of hydropower up in Labrador, and if that could be used to, run some large greenhouses or something of the type. Now, maybe Lynn, you could maybe take us through opportunities for this type of installation to help in food security in remote locations.
I do definitely think that that's something that could happen. However, in remote communities right now, everyone is running off of diesel. So there is opportunity, and there have been some studies done where, sorry if you hear my dogs barking in the background, hopefully it's not too, but however, any waste heat from any diesel generation could certainly fund power a greenhouse. Sorry, I don't know why they're going crazy.
It's all part of web diffusion. Okay, thank you. So Ravi, we've got a couple questions in about the nutritional content or the nutritional value of lab-grown meat, and also for indoor-grown plants as well. Is there, and maybe Lynn as well, you might have some insights into this, but is there much research going on into the nutritional aspects of these, these meats and vegetables grown with these new technologies? Are they more nutritious, less nutritious? What do we know so far about this? Maybe you start with Ravi.
Yeah, so I mean, this is an exciting area for research. So not much attention has been paid to sort of determine the nutritional content and to tune the nutritional content. But that is one capability that cultivated meat provides, is depending on the initial composition that we start with in formulating this, we could basically tune those contents. So one of the areas of research that we have done in the past is to change the ratios of muscle cells with fat cells, and that can be able, you can tune the composition in that particular way. There have been thoughts in the past on incorporating certain nutrients as these cells grow, and therefore that is then incorporated into the meat that is produced. So those are all some possibilities that exist. But currently, I think the major challenge that people are facing is the high cost of the production of just muscle, right? And that associated with combining it with the taste and the texture has been sort of the main challenge that has been tackled. And then I think others would be taken up soon. And from an academic perspective, that is our interest, is to look at how the technology that we use and the media that we use then change not only the nutritional content, but also what the cells produce and how they respond, is of significant academic interest as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Thomas, is there anything you would add to this?
Certainly parallels quite a bit with what Ravi was saying. From a plant perspective, it's, well, I'll use an example. A lot of people say, well, greenhouse grown tomatoes, they don't taste like anything. They're not as good as field grown. And there's some truth to that, because as I mentioned in my talk, plants integrate their entire environment and they respond to that by making different things. And plants respond to stress. And if you give them a nice cushy environment, they're not stressed. So they're not making some of these compounds, which they use for other things, but we interpret as flavor. But we know that. So now we can start to look at what is quote unquote optimized, and we can apply those stresses in a very controlled fashion in these controlled environments. The result being, as I showed with those lettuce, we can quite accurate control the nutritional composition. We can make it better. We can amp up different things simply by changing the environment. A plant is, these are rough numbers, but it's the product of its genetics and its environment, same as we are. And if you can manipulate the environment, you can nurture. You can make a more healthy lettuce or anything else. Mm-hmm. Even just changing the color of the light will do that. So.
Right. Well, that's perfect. And Lynn, do you have any thoughts related to this, like perhaps from the perspective of a dietitian and your current projects in your communities about hydroponically grown food, or any research you might be aware of that could speak to this?
We have done a few classroom grown, like tomatoes and that. I think it's an opportunity to get the children involved in growing food and that as well. So, growing tomatoes, I think when children are involved in the growing of food, they may be more interested in trying it. So, children a lot of times, if their parents don't eat vegetables, they don't want to eat them as well. So, sometimes I see positive peer pressure in my own experience from kids, getting their friends are trying the vegetables that they grew. So someone else is going to try it. And, I think that can have a great effect.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. It's a really interesting point. I mean, the future of food. One thing that I took back from your presentation is like the education aspect, the food literacy aspect, right? That falls into the future of food as well, or food security. So education is often an overlooked aspect of the conversation. Really interesting. I think we have time for like one more really quick question before I have to turn it over again. So why are these future food technologies complementary and not a replacement? Is it a cost benefit issue? Maybe over to you, Thomas.
I guess that's probably in response to my comment on the field production versus, well, again, I said maybe, so it certainly cost. But when you look at long-term crops, and there is some research to squish this down, but wheat, for example, can take 120, 150 days, a long time. To do that inside well, just the energy cost is too much. So, and other things would be, you can do it, in space, you got to grow all these things, but root crops, things that store well, that you can ship. Probably in terms of food security, probably wouldn't hit that too much either, because it can be done well outside. So it's complementary in the sense that there are things that we should and could bring into indoor production, things that are some issues of food safety. There was a whole slew of recalls and on romaine lettuce, for example, and people were dying. And that was largely a field contamination issue. Well, if you're doing it indoors where these 10 things don't touch the produce, then you go a long way to avoid that. So there are lots of reasons to make the shift for some things, but not all. Certainly not wheat and corn and stuff like that. Again, maybe down the road, but not today.
And Lynn, do you have any thoughts concerning this, maybe from like what could be lost culturally, perhaps, if we replace,
Yeah, I think, as I was saying earlier, our elders are, they no longer, they're passing away and they're not passing on that traditional knowledge. And so if those skills are lost, how are we going to get it back? So I don't think I'm really answering your question here, but with the loss of skills and knowledge, I think it's a huge disadvantage. And so I think we need to marry the technology with our traditional ways. And I think by doing that, we will be successful in the future with food.
And to wrap us all up, Ravi, any thoughts on why this maybe lab cultured meat wouldn't replace all of our meat?
I think, the evidence is quite clear, right? We are running out of land to satisfy the human demand for meat as is, right? And then in the future, if more countries such as India and Africa grow to a stage where there is lots of disposable income, meat consumption is going to grow. And so often, as with energy technologies, new one is never going to replace the old one per se, but it is just going to add on to that. There are benefits and limitations to both of these technologies, and complementarily they can satisfy the overall demand as it is growing. So I don't see much in the sense it is going to solve a problem that is unsustainable at the moment.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much to all three of you for your fabulous perspectives on this topic and for answering these questions so perfectly. I think it offers some really good context for our viewers. And I think this was a really great conversation to kind of have us look at the future of food maybe a little bit more broadly than we were before we came in here. And I'm very excited for the Googling to come. I have a lot of questions of my own now. So many thanks.